It's kind of later, but we can do it now. As far as reforecasting goes, we've delayed. Oh, sorry. There's a project which we borrow for that funds that we were going to put into that particular project. We borrow in December each year. At December, we made the decision that we won't borrow for that amount, that we thought over the next year that wouldn't come in, and it looks like that won't. So we haven't borrowed for it, so we're not paying for it, the interest or anything on that. But as yet, we haven't taken it out or anything like that. I think that's our take on that. So that was kind of our reforecasting position, and now that reforecast is now our target against what we present our normal financial report to you. So that normal financial report comes on page 81. So when we report to our pro rata, that's the basis of those pro ratas is now that reforecast amount which we talked about. So I've got the usual presentation there. There's three of what we've called kind of major management variances on a couple of groups of activities. So we'll go through those just to highlight those areas which are kind of outside the pro rata budget. And first is strategic planning, and that really does align to what we've just talked about in the reforecasting. Obviously, we've given them a lot more budget all of a sudden for these hearing processes, but those costs haven't come in yet. So based on last year's pro rata, they should have spent a certain proportion of their money by now, but obviously with these things still in play, that's going to be in the next kind of 2 months that we're going to pay for those. So at the moment they're looking like they haven't spent their budget, but I have been assured that they will, that we've just talked about in the reforecast. So that's the reason for that favourable variance there. The second part is regional resources, which is 210,000 favourable based on where we think they should have been. And there's a number of obviously projects that make that up. We've chosen the big areas and just talked on those. So we've got land management, air quality, coastal and gravel are the major ones there. Some are up, some are down. The land management has two major projects. One of them is the regional land science, the research in the science area. They're favourable at the moment. They've got some large budget in there for different models, but the technical side escapes me a little bit. So if you want to know more of that, I'm sure Ian can elaborate on that. Otherwise, they are looking at probably either spending that or that will come up towards the end of the year where we do talk about any carry forwards that would be needed. We try and eliminate as many of those as we can to keep our levels of service where they should be, but sometimes that can happen, and that may be the case in that project. And the same with our sustainable land management. Obviously they have a chunk of money for land care grants, which they always get through in the end, so the timing of those can depend on what's happening on specific farms, but they've assured me that will either that will be spent for those, and they've
just a question in relation to that, Councillor Scott.
It's really to staff over a couple of things that are raised under the regional resources. One is, sounds to me like a really good news story, and that's the being able to access software that already can cope with the sediment transportation modelling rather than having to develop it ourselves. Is that what I'm reading there? And it looks to us as if we may benefit from that considerably.
So through you, Mr Chair, it's in the land science budget we had made provision for a trim type model to move into Hiratonga and to build one. What we've done is, with the arrival of two new people in the groundwater modelling space, they brought with them a range of understanding and expertise in terms of model platforms. So we've now moved to a new model platform called Mod HMS, which has something, a module that adds to it called SURFACT, which is a contaminant transport model. So it's effectively built and designed for that purpose. So it means we don't need to construct our own contaminant transport model because that's already in the platform that we've purchased. So what that means is that we don't have to spend a lot of money building something new, and instead we can divert that resource into providing data to drive the model, because the models are very data hungry, and obviously the more data that you can load into them, the more they are likely to approximate reality. So that's where we're heading with that project.
And the other one raises real fears for future costs, and that's the review of the air quality standards with moving to measurement of 2.5 microns. And if we actually have a new standard that is going to force us to consider that and remedial action on that, I can see some huge expenses ahead for Hawke's Bay. How much input are we having into the design around the standards?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, again, this is a recommendation coming from the PCE's report. So there's been no signals from the Ministry or Government that would translate into a review of the National Environment Standard. But what we're doing is anticipating that might happen, and so starting to collect data, PM 2.5 data, to inform that discussion. Whether or not that will result, the PCE's recommendations will result in a change to the NS, I don't know. But like I say, there's certainly no signal so far that that's on the radar. But if it did, it would
be some years out before we actually...
potentially, and all of those cost-benefit analyses would be done by the Ministry, and certainly we would have the ability to input to that as well.
Right. So really, I guess the financial report from then on is reasonably standard to what you're used to. So if you've got any questions on those, otherwise we can move into the commentary.
Let's actually take a break now.
Sure.
It's 12:30, and I don't want to constrain any. There's been some good discussion here, so I don't want to put any limits on that. So let's actually break and come back at 1 o'clock and continue with this and other business. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.